Recovery Sort Of is a podcast where we discuss recovery topics from the perspective of people living in long-term recovery. This podcast does not intend to represent the views of any particular group, organization, or fellowship. The attitudes expressed are solely the opinion of its contributors. Be advised, there may be strong language or topics of an adult nature.
Welcome back. It's Recovery Sort Of. I'm Jason, a guy that is not going to have any joke right here.
And I'm Billy. I'm a person in long-term recovery.
And today we have with us Austin. Hi, Austin.
Hi, Austin.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going all right, man. And Austin's going to help us explore the topic-ish of what it's like to have a death by suicide in your life experience, I guess, is maybe a way I could lay it out that doesn't feel fucking incredibly terrible. I don't know, man. Let me just put the microphone in front of you, Austin, and you can go ahead and do some talking.
Yeah, so I think the correct term would be a survivor of suicide. Survivor of suicide.
Survivor of, yeah.
I don't know, something weird, something like that. You know, like I had a family member die by suicide. Right.
And that's, yeah. And I mean, I think what we're acknowledging right now, just in the first couple minutes of this, is how difficult it is to even try to figure out, right, like the right words or the right ways to talk about such an important and painful and hurtful topic. And, I guess from Billy and my side, we'll do our best. We are not the experts in politically correct terminology or even in couth at times, but we will do our best to try to like honor this topic. And but yeah, I think Austin, you're here. You're probably much more the expert than us. Why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about your story, why you're here to talk about this topic, what feels relevant for you to share?
Yeah. So once again, my name's Austin. In August 3rd of 2020, my sister died by suicide. We're both addicts. Luckily, I'm in recovery. I celebrated 5 years this month.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And so whenever she died by suicide, she so this might be a little graphic, fair warning. She decided to shoot herself in front of her husband. She went through a lot of domestic violence with her relationship with her husband. We witnessed a lot of that growing up. See, and that's kind of the weird thing. Like, they say that like a lot of times we seek out people that are kind of like our parents, right? And so like, obviously she kind of found somebody that was like my dad, like pretty abusive, pretty, she just witnessed a lot of domestic violence growing up. And, the biggest thing with her is I think she just wanted to be loved, right? She just wanted to be loved, and she wasn't getting that from her relationship with her husband. And she started using again. She was fine whenever she was clean, and or maybe not fine, but she was stable, right? And that's another part of it is she was also diagnosed with depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder. So mental health played into it a lot. For me, the biggest thing I could say is that like I'm grateful for where I was in my recovery, because I don't know if I would have been able to handle that without using, if I didn't have such a solid recovery, because I'm also in a program, Narcotics Anonymous. I do a lot with our fellowship up here. I'm located in Wyoming, which, to put into some perspective, right? Wyoming's almost the same population as Baltimore for the whole state. So.
And it's a much bigger state, I believe.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, for one city compared to the whole state, right?
Is it true that there's more sheep in Wyoming than people?
Probably, yeah. I could see it. A lot more animals in general.
Yeah, and I don't want to get us completely off topic, Austin, but I'm just personally interested. I know Billy has talked about his travels out west into like more sparse populations and how hard it is to find meetings and get to meetings. Can you talk just a little bit about like what the state of 12-step looks like in Wyoming compared to like maybe a more metropolis area?
Yeah, actually I can. So my wife and I got out of treatment. We actually moved to the after treatment. She went to treatment in the southwest corner of the state. I went to Montana. Once we got out, we decided to make that location change, right? So we decided to move, stay down there in the southwest corner. When I got there, NA was basically non-existent. Like people were just going there to sign each other's papers. There was actually or hook up or you know sell dope. Like it just was very toxic.
That's
right?
disgusting. What town is that?
Right. Yeah. So that didn't last long, right? That meeting obviously didn't last super long, which I'm grateful for because it wasn't a meeting, right? And so we decided to start a meeting down there. And yeah, to this day, it's still going strong. You know, we moved back to my hometown in the northeast corner of the state, and there was some solid recovery up here. There was a solid meeting that's been around since 2014, but along with that comes, like the politics and the ups and downs and the resentments and everything else that goes, personalities before principles was happening a lot, right? And so we decided to just give people another avenue and start another group. So like the southwest corner of the state in our area, we had to travel basically 100 miles in any direction to hit another meeting. Wow. Yeah. And so it's very spread out. It's becoming more common, right? More groups are popping up, littler towns, and we try to support them. We try to travel and visit various groups throughout our region. I'm involved in the region pretty heavily. Yeah, I don't know. So like our bigger cities, right, which still wouldn't be considered a big city, right? Like Casper, Wyoming is our second largest city with 50,000 people. And they have between like 4 and 6 different groups down there, so.
Wow. It's just such a different picture than what, like you said, the meeting's been established and going strong since 2014. And I was like, man, so many meetings in Baltimore from like the early 80s or at least early mid 90s, right? Like it's so much more established. And I think, and I don't know now, last time I heard somebody say it was like 543 meetings a week in our Baltimore area.
Phew.
Like
I know there's 32 or 33 groups just in this area, which is just 2 counties, and we're a rural community.
Right. And he's talking about an area that there's like 4 or 5 meetings a week. You know what I mean? Or groups. Like that's just such a drastic difference. And in level of like what it looks like, I'm sure it's a difference in how it feels for your recovery. I'm sure it's a difference in like what's available to access. Like you said, there's a lot of personalities, and if you're in a smaller area, there's not maybe as many personalities. You might be the only different personality, so like that's, I don't know, I imagine that's a really different level of support as you're going through some of the tougher things in your life.
Yeah, so I just counted, right? And so like there's 21 towns and cities in the state that have meetings for the whole state.
Wow. That's incredible.
And I mean, once again, that's very spread out.
Right.
And we do have meetings too in other places, Evanston, Wyoming. They've had their meetings established since like the 80s, but also like you get that personality, right? Evanston's got like a little over 10,000 people, and due to resentments and whatever, they also have like 4 groups in that little town now,
Resentment in a coffee pot.
It's a little different, but yeah, like you said, like I've been to big cities. I've worked in the oil field, basically from New Mexico to North Dakota. I went to the World Convention in 2018 down in Orlando. Like I've been all over, hit meetings all over, and so it is a lot different.
How do you handle the like suggestions of like 90 meetings in 90 days for newcomers and things like that.
They don't suggest
them.
And
well, it's in the basic text, but
is it?
Yeah, in the It Works How and Why chapter. I mean, What Can I Do chapter.
Huh.
And like, do you feel like that is maybe I don't know, that limited access is like a barrier, or maybe was a hurdle that was maybe hard for you and your sister to overcome? Well, not for you, you've obviously done it, but for her.
Right. Yeah. So I think it was, she's also a violent offender. She went to prison for, so my sister's a little crazy. Okay. Right. She went to prison for intimidation of a witness. She beat up a confidential informant, put a gun to her head, all sorts of stuff like this. And so she, when I was in early recovery, that was the first time she went to treatment, and I got to travel and go to the treatment facility and do her family days with her and kind of hash out some of our trauma and our resentments and stuff like that. But the thing about it is, like, she knew where to find recovery. She just wasn't. And as far as what you said about 90 meetings in 90 days, like, yeah, certain places, like here in Gillette, we have at least one meeting every day.
Okay.
Sometimes two. So it's easy for you to do it here, right? Other places, not so much. The one benefit of the pandemic has been the Zoom platform, right? Now there's really no excuse. Like, you can hit a meeting at any time of any day via Zoom. But before that, yeah, it was really, really difficult to hit 90 and 90 around here,
That's so crazy that that's actually in the literature when that book was written so long ago, when there wasn't. I mean, there was barely a meeting a day in bigger cities at that point in time. I'm shocked. Does it say 90 in 90 days?
It says a meeting a day for your first 90 days is how it's worded. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's so wild that it's in there. I guess what I was thinking, Austin, about the difference in how it looks is I'm picturing Baltimore City, right? You have 3 years clean. This tragic event happens in your life. And the way I would picture that people would tell you to seek support would be to be in a meeting every day, or maybe even multiple meetings a day, right? It would be like, this is where you should be and how you should seek support. And I imagine in an area like yours, that might look a whole lot different. That might look like a lot more outside of meeting support, right? That might be like the people in your network showing up every day for a coffee with you or to sit with you for a while. It might not necessarily be like, oh, hey, you should be in a meeting every day, if that's not even what's available or what it looks like in your area.
Yeah. So, like, during the event, right, I was still living in the southwest corner of the state. I only came up to visit my family because it's a 6-hour drive one way.
And is that your sister was where your hometown was, you said, was it northeast corner? Yep. Okay.
Yeah. She was in the northeast corner. I was in the southwest corner. So I only came to visit my family maybe 2 or 3 times a year because I hated that drive, right? Mm-hmm. Round trip, 12 hours. Mm-hmm. And so I leaned on the program really heavily, and good thing that, like, every time that I did come home, I went to meetings, and I established some relationships with some of the people in the program up here, because whenever after it happened, NA showed up for me. They really did. I had people from the program up here that didn't even know my sister that came to the funeral just to support me. Mm-hmm. And so that was one thing. It's kind of like that saying, like, no matter where you go, there you are, right? Mm-hmm. Like, if I go seeking out substances, I'll find them. If I go seeking recovery, I can find it. I might have to look a little harder, but and instead of getting the dope man's numbers from all over, I was getting people that were in the program's numbers, mm-hmm. right? And so that was another thing. So, like, after her funeral, and they did the memorial afterward, they had it at a bar, but and I stayed for about an hour until people started to get drunk, and I was like, all right, I don't like this, peace out, I'm going to a meeting,
right.
And it was kind of funny too, because I got a friend And he was like, "Oh, look at you going to do something positive for yourself while I'm over here drowning my sorrows," and like, it's just, I have better coping skills today. I have better tools, that don't involve that nothing that can happen to me today. The solution would be to use, right?
Right.
That's never that's never the solution for me. Um, to kind of get back, onto the subject, right? Wyoming has, I got some statistics right here. So Wyoming has the number one, the highest suicide rate in the nation per capita.
Wow.
In my county, in 2020, and this is a county of like 4,500 or 45,000 people, we had 21 suicides.
Wow.
In 2022. Yeah, in 2022, 21 suicides. Wyoming as a total for 2022 had 155 suicides. Nationally in 2020, that was the most recent statistics I could find, per the CDC website, was 45,979 people died by suicide. So to put that in perspective, for the nation, that would be my whole county.
Wow.
That'd be everybody in my county, plus some.
Mm-hmm.
And so one thing that we need to start doing a little bit better of a job at is like normalizing therapy, right? I'm a big advocate for therapy. And like growing up, it was kind of hard. People always like, my dad was like, "You don't cry, I'll give you something to cry about," like,
right.
We don't show emotions, especially as men. It's got that stigma still attached to it a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so breaking that stigma is one thing that I think really needs to get done. It's kind of like we're finally seeing the stigma being broken of addicts in recovery, right? Especially with over 100,000 or overdose deaths in the nation. Like, that's unreal, right? And so now that treatment and recovery is becoming more prevalent and more accepted, I think we need to do that with mental health as well.
Yeah. Now, is Wyoming, so we're in Maryland, and Baltimore City is a more progressive city, but where we're at is like a rural county, and it's quite conservative. So a lot of the views on addiction and mental health, for that matter, are probably 20 years behind where they should be, or where we'd like to see them. I mean, we have a lack of resources available within the county for both mental health and substance use. How is it in Wyoming? Are they any more progressive, less progressive?
We are like the reddest state whenever it comes to that. We are red-blooded Americans around here, so to say. Right? It's very conservative. Is
it like very Christian based? I know some of like Kansas and those areas are way more Christian.
It's interesting that Wyoming has the highest rate of suicide per capita and then is the reddest conservativist state. Yeah. Is there a correlation there or causation?
Lack of resources.
I don't know. I think that's a big thing, is lack of resources, right? Okay, so like in 2014, when I was trying to get clean on my own, like, I'm a IV heroin addict. I knew I was going to die. Like, I was in really rough shape. I went into an outpatient treatment facility, was going to like IOP, intensive outpatient. I was doing counseling, but I was still using. And so that was how I kind of coped with it, try to better myself while I waited to get into a treatment facility. Right. Well, I was like 60 to 90 days out waiting on a bed, right? Waiting on a bed date. There's like 5 treatment facilities, 6 maybe, for the whole state. I don't know. Lack of resources is definitely one of the biggest things too. And that was like a big thing too, like 2020, with the pandemic and with everything that went on. They cut a lot of resources, right? They cut a lot of funding for for mental health resources, which I thought was one of the stupidest things they could have done.
Yeah.
Because people are locked away in their house. They're more likely to be abusing substances. Like, it had a very traumatic effect on people's well-being and mental health, right? And so for them to cut funding, I was mind blown, right? And so, like, that too could go back to what Jason was saying, like, being more conservative, they might not have thought it was relevant, you know?
It's interesting. I mean, I just trying to think of the ideals that could possibly play into something like that. And I'm not trying to like pick apart conservative minded people or liberal minded people, but just this idea that like the general feeling of conservatism is like we want smaller government, less interference, less people intruding in our life and telling us what to do. We want to just kind of take care of it ourselves. And I don't, that's not a terrible thing in and of itself, right? I don't disagree with that point of view. And yet, when there's no oversight or no other outside, not to say that government's the right people, but if there's not even community looking into our windows and saying, oh, maybe this isn't a very great condition in this house. Like, if we're all just not monitored or not connected, like, I guess what I'm trying to say is when you were conservative and wanted less government and there was a small community around you and you guys supported each other and like were there to kind of call each other out if things weren't looking right, that's one thing. But in 2023, when everybody just kind of doesn't leave their house and doesn't talk to their neighbors, that version of conservatism and lower oversight looks a lot more like fucking dangerous situation for kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I think with the amount of suicides we've had, with the amount of suicide attempts, with the amount of calls that law enforcement goes out on, whether it be with someone, suffering a mental health episode, all the substance abuse that we have around, I think they're finally starting to realize that, yeah, like we need more resources, but it's still hard because we do have some people that are just kind of old school and kind of stuck in their ways, right?
Right.
Well, in my understanding of conservatism, a big part of that is like you succeed or fail on your own merits, and it's up to you, and that pick yourself up by your bootstraps. And of course, for those of us that are struggling with addiction or mental health, like when I was using actively, like I didn't have the capacity to pick myself up by my bootstraps, you know what I mean? And I had no income, no money. So if it wasn't for resources that were provided by the community, I wouldn't have had anything to go to. I went to a state-run rehab, is where I went.
Right.
The other problem with that is a lot of these programs, if you base the success of the program off the success rate of the individuals, we all know like addiction and mental health programs, they're sort of lifelong. They're not going for 30 days or 60 days or 90 days. People need typically long-term care. So you can't measure that program to say, oh, look, it's a great success, we should continue to fund it. And so therefore it's easy to say, well, we should just cut that out. It doesn't work anyway, so let's just cut it out.
Right.
But it's not viewed as a social safety net. It's viewed as, just some program.
Well, and not to get us way off of the fucking topic, but just thinking about the idea of like during COVID, we had these child tax credit payments for people, right? And if you look at a situation, we're going to judge people and we're going to say, oh, Billy over there who comes from a household median income of $500,000, where his parents didn't have to worry about money, where they had more time to take off of work and show up for him and take him to doctor's appointments and give him care. He can pull himself up by his bootstraps as an adult. Why can't Jason over there, who grew up with like rags and hand-me-downs and never got ahead and couldn't get to the doctors when he was sick? And, we're going to judge that. And like a more stressed parent who doesn't have money for food for the whole fucking week is not going to be able to take care of their kids in as good of a situation as somebody who doesn't worry about money. And it's just like, why can't we see that and make the decision to support parents so that we can stop harming children? Because we can have a lot of conversations today, but one of the things that sticks out to me is that this life is not here anymore because of the situation they grew up in. that's my take on it. I don't know if you disagree, Austin, but like that's exactly what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, well, okay, and so you go back to basically like you were saying, like everybody was locked down, the government was giving out free money, you know what I mean? Or I don't know if you consider it free. I'm sure we'll pay it back someday, somehow.
We are
we
now.
always do.
$8 eggs.
Oh, it's only 8 there? Dang, dude. Like 10, 12 out here. But, they say idle hands is the devil's playground. I was fortunate. I stayed working the whole time. So did my wife. And my wife worked in a treatment facility. In the treatment setting, I was in the oil and gas industry, so I was considered essential, because that's part of our nation's infrastructure, right?
Right.
So I was lucky, I didn't get to sit at home and have nothing but free time.
That doesn't
I could tell you that. I could tell you that it was lucky because I know where my head goes. I know where my addict brain will take me if I'm doing nothing but sitting in my house,
right.
and getting handed money. It's a matter of time for me, I think, in that situation until I'm going to the liquor store or finding something else, to pass the time. And so I think that did have a huge effect on everybody, even the people that were essential, because we were still seeing it. We were seeing the consequences of that with our friends and our family and our neighbors and everybody else around.
Right. So, I mean, you said you were like really entrenched in the program when this all happened, and doing the math myself, I'm guessing you had like right around 3 years in recovery. Man, I'm thinking back to having 3 years in recovery, Billy, and I was not ready. Maybe I had the right network and support system to help me through it because I did feel pretty plugged in at that time, but God, I was not ready to handle anything this big.
Yeah.
That just sounds. Can you talk a little bit about like how, I don't know, what was the experience? What did you go through? Was it shocking, devastating? Like, share with us what you're comfortable sharing with.
Yeah. So, and that's the thing about it is like the grief process, right? It comes in waves, still to this day, I have ups and downs. Like there'll be times I'll be at work and today I operate heavy equipment. And so I sit in a piece of equipment for 12 hours a day by myself. I got plenty of time to just be thinking. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so like even to this day, like I'll go from like 1 second, like cussing my sister out to like crying to then just like thinking about happy times. Right. But so in that moment, right after she took her life, honestly, like one of the biggest things, like my wife, she's the one that turned me on to you guys about 3 years ago. My wife Autumn, she's emailed you guys a few times. She has a few couple more years clean than I do, and also working in the treatment facility. She's just amazing, right? And so like,
did she 13 step you?
No, we used together. She just got clean before I did.
I gotcha.
She went to a very long-term treatment program. She was in there for like 9 months.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah. And actually my daughter has the most clean time out of all of us.
That's fantastic. I hope it always stays that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too. But so like she was a huge support, man. Like without her, I don't know if I would have been able to do it. My mom was a wreck. She's still kind of a wreck these days. Like it's getting easier. I won't say it's getting better. It's getting easier. But So like my wife basically wrote the obituary, like basically did almost everything for the funeral. I helped when I could, but yeah, like it was an emotional time. But at the same time, like for me, I was also really good at still kind of stuffing my feelings down, right? Um, it didn't hit me until a little while after that I was actually able to grieve and to cry and to feel those emotions, right?
Right.
But that was the first thing I did whenever I got that phone call. My mom called me crying. She couldn't even talk. My stepdad had to get on the phone and tell me what happened. And directly after that, I called some sponsees and I called my sponsor. And after that, middle of the night, it was like midnight when I got the phone call. Packed everything up, loaded up the kid and the dog, and made the 6 hour trip to Gillette to be with my family and to start working on that process of getting the funeral together, getting just taking care of whatever we could take care of, to be with my family really was the biggest part, being that support for them. A little while after it, so like there are support groups, grief and loss support groups. One of the biggest helps was I went to this grief group down in Rock Springs, and the guy that facilitated it, Jim, he's one of the strongest people I know. So he lost his daughter to suicide. A couple years later, it was too hard for him to handle, or for his wife to handle, and she took her own life. And then later that year of 20 no in early 2020, he lost his son to an accidental overdose. And so he's like it's just me and my daughter left, right? And so me and him laughed together in there, we cried together, like he was huge support. But most of the time, being as a smaller community, it was usually just like me and him, right? And so like we got that intimate relationship, we got to be able to talk about all this stuff. And so it was basically counseling, but with two, just basically, like the saying, one addict helping another. It was one grieving person helping another. And so that was a tremendous support for me. Yeah, I don't know, man. And see, it's like, I don't know, it's a weird thing because like it's one thing for I think it'd feel different if it was like an accident, right? Like she died in a car accident, or you know what I mean. But when somebody takes their own life, like they really got to be in a low spot or really not thinking about what they're doing. So my sister was heavily intoxicated on alcohol and methamphetamine when she did it. She was off her mental health medication. There were all these variables that played into it, right? And so times I like to think that like, hey, if she would have been on her meds and stable, this wouldn't have happened, or if she wouldn't have been loaded, this might not have happened, or like I can play all these what ifs, right? You end up playing the what if game a lot whenever it comes to somebody that passes away, especially by suicide, right? Because then like you start feeling like, hey, like was there more that I could have done? Like what should I could have reached out more, I could have, this and that, but at the end of the day, like I just have come to like accept it for what it is, that like she decided to do what she did, and I just got to move on. And like, so that's why the programs taught me to carry the message to the addict that still suffers. Why can't I carry a message of hope to people suffering with mental illness, people feeling hopeless, feeling like there's not, that there's not something out there for them, right? because I also, I suffer from depression and anxiety, right? My mental, so I always said, like if my substance abuse didn't kill me, my mental health was going to, right? Especially whenever I was at the lowest point in my life. Because like you said, I had nothing, right? I had nothing. I gave everything away due to my addiction, right? I was homeless at times. I was so towards the end of my addiction, I was basically squatting in a trailer. I had no electricity, no gas, no running water, like just miserable life, right?
Right.
And so I was at a very low spot, and I think my child was like the only thing that gave me a little bit of hope and light, right? That like I needed to get my shit together so that I could be a father for this beautiful little girl I have, right? Well, my sister didn't have children. She didn't have that, She didn't have. I think she just felt lost and hopeless, right? And so today, like I tried to advocate, like, you might be going through a tough time right now. You might be going through some hardships. You might feel alone. You might feel hopeless, but there's always, I feel like there's always light at the end of the tunnel. Like that doesn't need to be the solution today to your problems, right? That's a permanent. They say that's a permanent solution to a temporary problem, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I get the saying, and yet it's still, I don't know that it provides a lot of comfort for you or anybody else that's dealing with it. I don't want to bring this up to try to make any comparisons or levels or intensities of what people go through. I think there's a lot of similarities across the field of grief for anybody who's ever had to experience that. So, like, I don't know that a ton of people can relate into this particular instance, but I do think most of us can relate in some way to losing someone and trying to move on without them. And, the experience of like having to make some of these calls and the support that shows up or doesn't. We did a grief episode quite a while ago, and the individual that guested on that episode shared that like in the immediate sense or wake of what happened, everybody showed up, right? It was like nonstop outpouring of all this support. And then, there came this time period or this line where it felt to them, and nobody said this to them, but it felt to them like people were tired of hearing about it. And it was like time for them to get over it almost, or is what it felt like. Did you experience any of that? I know you already kind of talked about how you sort of sought out this other place, and I think that was probably has a lot to do with where you got a lot of support. But I'm curious, did it feel like the support kind of dropped off at some point in time?
You know, I kind of feel like it has in a way, right? So like up here in Gillette, they are very few grief and loss groups, or like there is one, but it's like really kind of toxic because it's just like the guy that facilitates it just comes in there and just like completely trashes his wife. Like he's very, very angry about his wife taking her life, and I mean, I understand it, like that's part of grief, right? You go through an anger phase or, but it's like super unhealthy, right? It's so, like my mom actually attends most of her support groups online. Um, but that's another avenue, right? For support. You can find support online. You can find support. I go to counseling, I go to therapy, right? My mom goes to counseling. I got my daughter in a grief group, which she absolutely loves. It's a children's grief group. But for me, like I have another avenue, which is through the program of Narcotics Anonymous. I can go there and I can spew my stuff, I can get all that stuff off my chest with like-minded people. But at the same time, like not everybody's gonna have that, right?
Yeah.
And so this comes back to like kind of breaking that stigma, making resources more available. Like I think we need to have, more grief and loss groups. And I'm sure it's different in bigger cities. I'm sure people have that, but As far as like, you said our rural communities, it's just not available a lot.
Yeah, I was also picturing that like a lot of people I would imagine with our backgrounds, right? People in recovery, I would imagine a lot of us feel a sense of having lost people we cared about to death by suicide, right? Like I know, and you brought this up before we started recording for the show today, like even though it's not technically considered or counted in the quote unquote official numbers of suicide deaths, even I remember hearing in the fellowship, like we're practicing this idea of suicide on a time or on an installment plan, basically, right? Like we're doing a little bit of time killing ourselves every day, and we never do know when it's going to be that time. And so I get it. Maybe there's some nuanced difference between the two, but I would imagine a lot of people feel like the person they lost had an active hand in the end of their life. And that's just a really, really hard concept, I think, to handle. Like you said, by accident, by disease, at least it feels like there's a reason. And I would imagine it would be really hard to, especially when we already struggle with understanding life and understanding the world, it would be really difficult to try to get through the feelings of having to deal with the thing without understanding why.
Well, I think there's an area of compassion, at least for me as an addict. Like I remember using it at the end of my using, like I didn't really care if I died. I didn't want to actively kill myself, but I didn't really care if I died and thought I'm going to die any time now. So I think at least for me, as I got clean, that experience allows me to be way more empathetic to people that are in that state and make a different choice, because I know what that's like to be like, man, this is fucking hard.
Mm-hmm.
Like life is hard and things are difficult and I don't know what to do. And sometimes we just want relief from pain, and that can do that.
Yeah.
But obviously it hurts those around us as well. So it's tough.
That's the hardest part, right? It's like trying to one of the hardest parts in my opinion is like trying to console somebody that lost somebody to suicide, right? And that's another part, right? Like say I lose somebody to cancer, like, or a friend of mine loses their parent to cancer, like I can kind of console them in a different way because it was anticipated, right? Whenever it's something that's unexpected, I think it's kind of harder to console somebody, especially whenever it's by, like you said, it's by their own hand. Like Billy said though, like I was at the end of, like at the end of my addiction, I didn't care if I lived or used.
Same.
I mean, lived or died. I was just, I was just an empty shell of a person anyway, and, today, like you said, I'm like way more compassionate. I'm way more empathetic. Like, and that's why, like, I kind of, try to be an advocate for people, for support, for whatever, like, trying to be that, that beacon of hope to tell people that like whatever you're going through is temporary, like we can get through this. Like, there's resources out there. Some might be more difficult to find than others. But that's also a gift of the internet, right? Like you could find just about whatever resource you want online these days. And so that's another blessing that we have at our, at our disposal.
Well, when you talk about that idea of like, at the end, we didn't really care to be alive. One of the things that stands out to me about that, and you kind of mentioned you were an empty shell of a person, and I was thinking, yeah, I felt like whatever the thing is, we can give it some words. There's like vitality, chi, life energy, soul, like whatever the fuck it is in us that makes us feel alive or be alive, that was gone for the most part, right? There was just this like, very gray, black message of like, just get the means to get one more at all times. Like that was the only thing that went on inside of me. So yeah, it didn't feel like I was alive, and dying, so to speak, necessarily didn't feel like I was giving up anything. I felt like I was kind of already there. My body was just sort of going through the motions of still existing.
There's a Nine Inch Nails song, right? And he says, I believe I could see the future because I repeat the same routine. And that was, that spoke volumes to me because, like you said, it was the getting and finding ways and means to get more.
Yeah.
It was, every day it was like, how am I going to get money to get loaded? And then I get money and then I get loaded. And it was just this repetitive, vicious cycle. Right.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of people kind of feel that way with their mental health. Right. I feel like a lot of people go back and forth with themselves with trying to feel like, how am I going to get out of this depression? And then, something, they might find a little bit of relief, but then they keep going back. It's like that revolving door, right? They keep going back into that depressive state, or that, whatever the case may be, whether it be like they find some relief on playing video games, but then they know they got to go to school the next day and they're going to get bullied again. Like I feel like it's kind of that same cycle in a lot of different situations. And whenever it comes to your mental health, like, I feel like you got to find some sort of solution, right? To make yourself feel better, whether that be therapy, whether that be, going to counseling, whether that be going to support groups, whether that be just even talking to another person, like talking to my mom. Like, me and my mom have always been super close. And so, like, we lean on each other quite a bit. Right. But there's days that, like, for her, it's this repetitive cycle, right? With grief, at least, because, like, there's days when she's feeling all right and doing pretty good, and then maybe not even days, like hours, she's feeling all right and feeling good, and she found that temporary relief, whether it be working out in her small business, doing something for somebody else, and then a couple hours later it hits her again, and then she's bawling, and she's just like, has all these whys and these what if questions going on, and so, like, it's just a constant cycle, right?
Yeah.
And so, I don't know, it's
I think it would be helpful if we began a conversations around mental health as far as, like, assimilating it to, like, physical health. Like, most people just think, oh, you're just supposed to be mentally healthy with doing little to no work or maintenance or even research to see if you're mentally healthy.
Don't we think that about physical health too?
Well, we kind of do, but we're starting to learn, like, no, if you want to be, like, physically healthy, like, it depends on what you're eating, and are you exercising, and are you getting enough sleep, and are you getting enough sunlight, and all those things contribute to our physical health. And I think it would be helpful if we started looking at our mental health that way too. I know I was raised in a home where you didn't go to any kind of counseling, psychiatrist, psychologist, and if you did, that something was wrong, something was wrong with you. And we almost need to incorporate into our system, like, mental health wellness checkups. Like, you just go talk to a counselor, maybe once or twice a year, just to see how you're doing, like, as a checkup almost. And then having some regular routines around mental health. We're lucky, I think, in 12-step groups, if we're actively participating in a program with other healthy people. I'm going to give that caveat, that we're doing some of that. Like, I'm around people that are helping me. We have in the Narcotics Anonymous literature that just for today, reading about, getting a better perspective on my life and doing some things. I need to do that shit every day because my mental health, can lead me astray.
Yeah. I mean, if we could speak of the importance of, like, self-reflection, self-awareness, like, any clue that, hey, just what I do naturally as the course of my day every day might not be the right thing all the time. I just think we operate from this assumption of I'm always right. And we never even open the idea to, like, maybe I can hear somebody else or some other idea. And the way that impacts me in relation to this episode is the main thing that stands out is I don't know this for sure, but my take, for whatever that's worth, is that if we can have somebody on this world that can see us and hear us and validate us, we're probably not going to leave. And if we have left or are choosing to leave, that probably means that there's literally not one single person that's showing up for us in a meaningful way and really hearing what the fuck we're saying, really listening, really able to see through what they think the world should be and hear what we're saying it is for us. And for teenagers and children, this is like the scariest, because as a parent, I'm a guy who didn't hear my fucking kids for a while, right? And I work with people who aren't hearing their children, and I work around death by suicide. And it's sad. And it's just like, man, when are we going to decide to put like, yes, shitty things happen in the world, but if your parents hear you and see you, I think there's a way to get through it. There's a way to support you through it. All the worst bullying and whatever else could be happening with your peers. And like, to me, this is falling on parents, man. We need to fucking step up and acknowledge it and take the ownership of like, there's something else we can do besides be a dick or a punishment or you did the wrong thing, go to your room or give me your phone and now you don't have access to your support networks. And I don't know. Maybe I'm standing on a soapbox today. Sorry.
No, I think you both had really valuable points there. And like what Billy was saying, like, yeah, I think that's a great idea. You know what I mean? Go visit a counselor once or twice a year, and then maybe, you'll actually get into visiting that counselor more because you do realize you have some unresolved issues. And that's another big thing is trauma, right? And usually we only associate trauma with like massive events, right? Maybe domestic violence, sexual abuse, all these things. But man, trauma can happen. I lost my guinea pig. That was traumatic. I lost my job. My relationship just ended. Like a lot of these things are, I think being cheated on, right? I think if your significant other cheats on you, I think that's traumatic. You know what I mean? And like, I don't think people realize that like trauma plays a huge part in our life. And so like you were saying is like starting with our parents, like, yeah, I think that if our parents were a little bit more empathetic and more understanding, or at least willing to take the time out of their day to talk to their children and see like, hey, is everything all right with you? Like, how is school going? Like, how is school actually going? How is your relationship with your friends? How are you just doing mentally? You know what I mean? I think that would play a huge part in it. Cause like I said, we didn't really have that growing up. Both my parents are addicts. Like I'm grateful. Both of them are clean today and doing really well. And, but up until this event, like my dad still was that hardened person, right? He, didn't believe, he didn't believe in none of that stuff. He didn't believe about talking about your feelings, like none of that. And ever since this has happened, he's become a lot more compassionate, empathetic, understanding. He actually tells me, tells everyone, like one of his kids, that he loves them today. And like he's willing to talk about his feelings for once, and it sucks that it took this tragic event for that to happen. Right. But the thing about it is happening now.
Right.
Yeah, and hopefully we begin to make those changes generationally. Like I am better at talking about emotions and feelings with my kids than my parents ever were. And hopefully that begins a healthier trend, going forward.
Yeah. And what I was thinking when Austin was just giving us, some of that with the way he described parents not being able to show up and listen, or the ways maybe they would do better at it, it brought to mind, I think my first little soapbox moment was about, the evil parents, right? Even though that doesn't exist. But there's a lot of loving parents, and we accidentally dismiss our children as well, right? And I want to give the parents what that looks like. If every time your kid comes to you to talk about what they're going through, you try to give them a life lesson or a moral lesson, that's not humility like we talked about on our last episode, right? That's the feeling of, oh my God, I'm terrified they're not going to turn into a person that can make it in this world, and it's my job and I better fix it real quick. That is a fear reaction. That is what I have to tell you is more important than what you're telling me reaction. Maybe sometimes we'd be better off just like leaving the lectures and they'll figure it out, man. Yeah. Just be the good person you want them to be, and they will model the shit out of that. Right? So like maybe we don't need to do that so much. Maybe we can just listen.
Yeah, and sometimes letting people know that you love them or that you care is more than just throwing the words out there. You know, it is showing up. It's maybe taking them out to eat or having a conversation about something that they like that you're not into. I mean, I'll talk to my kids about, you know, video games or stuff that I know nothing about.
Right.
Just to try to let them know, like, hey, I'm interested, you know, in what you have going on. Like, you matter.
Yeah. And in 2023, one of the ways to show people they matter is put your motherfucking technological devices down. Like, that is, yeah. My phone is not in my face while we're talking to Austin or Billy or any, like, no, we need to be here and hear what people are saying. Austin, just keeping an eye on time, man. I would love for you to, like, if you could, move into some of the ways you've found beneficial for you to get involved more in maybe this cause or this topic, and the ways you find that have helped you heal through maybe however that looks.
Yeah, so I'm part of Suicide Prevention Coalition up here. I am also on the steering committee for the Crisis Intervention Team, which the Crisis Intervention Team has to do with how law enforcement handles people with mental illness.
Nice.
And so for the Crisis Intervention Team, you know, I get to go to some of their trainings and speak on my experience with my addiction, right, with my substance abuse disorder. I get to speak on my sister's suicide, right? I get to work with these law enforcement professionals, right? And that was something crazy too. An addict working with law enforcement like this, like, kind of blew my mind. Like, first time, or like anytime I introduce myself when I'm there, I'm like, it's nice to be sitting on the same side of the table as you guys. You know what I mean? It's nice to not be in handcuffs when I'm talking with you guys.
Right.
Like, you know. But just getting law enforcement a better understanding of how people with mental illness might think or might react. As far as like the prevention, working with the prevention, you know, like we have events, we speak. You know, my mom has become a pretty big advocate as well. She goes and shares her story about losing a child to suicide. You know, I get to go and speak on losing a sibling to suicide. And so just getting involved in the community, right? Getting people to understand that like mental health matters, right? And especially, so this is another weird thing, right? So the term was coined in like the 70s. So it's called Gillette syndrome. And it was based after the name of the town that I live in, right? And it's the social disruption of the effects of boom towns, right? So we're considered a boom town due to the oil, gas, and coal mining industries. The population, it was rapid population growth, and so due to that rapid population growth came deteriorated mental health, more crime, just so and so, right? It's not so much that like that these days. Like, we're pretty stable in our population, but I think that kind of carried on, you know, like.
Is that from like less connected communities because so many people are moving there at one time from all over the place that it's like a lot of strangers instead of like slowly progressing where like, oh, hey, there's 20 families here. One new family moves in. We all get to know them. Like, that's a lot more comfortable than just 80 people moving from 80 different places and none of you know each other. Like, that's a lot less community going on, a lot less connection.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it too, you know, like, because we still get people from all over. You know, we had a guy come to our meeting the other day. He's from Texas, up here working in the oil field. You know what I mean? And so like, we still get people from all over. And like you said, there's less connection. You know, that might be a big part of it, less connection. And going back to what I was talking about though, like about getting involved in the community, like each and every person can get involved in the community. You can go volunteer at a soup kitchen. You can go volunteer at a library. Like you can go do volunteer work. You can something as simple as like going and asking your neighbor if you can walk their dog. You know what I mean? Like that's another thing. Like there's all different forms of therapy. Like I went to a treatment center that had equine therapy. I was able to go ride horses and spend time with horses. And in return, it got me out of myself. I was able to talk to these animals, and as weird as it might sound, like I was actually able to share secrets with an animal, and it was another being. It might not have been a person. They might not have understood what I was saying, but the thing about it is like I was getting it out. You know what I mean?
I
And so
can't
like that's
I can't get the picture out of my head of somebody going there and like sharing a really awful secret, and then like by accident or chance, like the horse kicks them right afterwards. Like, fuck,
yeah,
fuck, I can't even
bucks
share my
them off or
secrets with
something.
horses.
Yeah,
Judgmental horse.
Right.
no, and so like I think a big part of that would be very unfortunate. I think a big part of it though is just connection. Like you said, I'm connecting with an animal. I'm connecting with another being. So today I've made those connections. Right, I've made them with within my community with these law enforcement officers. I've made them with counselors. I've made them with our our prevention team, which are the prevention team has county commissioners, has doctors, has lawyers, has all these professionals on it. And so like I've made these connections with these people to try to get information out, try to get resources out. So that's a big thing that we're working on, is trying to get more resources readily available for people that are suffering. Whether they're suffering with their substance abuse, whether they're suffering with mental illness. And I think it's something like 70 or 80% of people that abuse substances also have a dual diagnosis disorder. It's a feelings disease, they say, right? And so like I was using to try to numb myself, try to cope with feelings or whatever. And so like I think a lot of people self-medicate, whether they're depressed or bipolar or whatever. I think they're just trying to self-medicate through substances. And so getting resources out, getting resources available, getting even just getting information out, right? We hand out little cards. It's like, like you matter, just simple stuff like that, like little cards that have like the 988 crisis number on it, like
Right.
getting this information out just so people like can even, I don't know, if somebody sees that, and it might change their thought.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, are there things like, as either a family member, loved one, friend, are there things we can do if we see maybe a friend or loved one in a emotional crisis, or actions we should take?
So going back to what Jason said, I think just listening, right? I think that's a huge thing. But there's definitely signs. So like making yourself aware of the signs, right? Observable signs of like serious depressions, right? Like unrelenting low mood, pessimism, hopelessness, desperation, anxiety, withdrawal, sleep problems, increased alcohol and drug use, threatening suicide, or expressing a strong wish to die. Like some of those are all signs, right? And so I think if we start to see some of these, especially just something as simple as like being withdrawn, right? I see somebody being withdrawn. I want to try to make contact with them. I want to try to, a big part of my thing is sharing my story, what I've gone through, whether it be with my substance abuse, with my own depression, with the loss of my sister, like, being able to talk with somebody, and, even better, just listening, I don't know how to say this. I think if we know the signs a little bit better, we might be able to have better judgment and be able to go talk to somebody about it, right? So you making yourself familiar with those warning signs. Just reaching out though, that's another thing, is like most people, at least in my experience, myself, like whenever I'm feeling like that, I don't want to reach out. I wanna self-loathe. I wanna sit in my shit and just be depressed, you know? And so if we familiarize ourselves with those signs, like, hey, we can go like, hey, how are you doing today? Like, I reach out to some of my sponsees and some of my friends and just be like, hey, like, how are you doing mentally today? Like, because a lot of people aren't going to just come out and talk about it.
Right. Right. I'm glad you brought up 988, which is our national suicide and crisis hotline. You can use that from anywhere in the U.S. It's sort of like, I guess, 911 for emotions, maybe. 911 is always still available. If you can't remember 988, call 911. That's fine. They will get you to the right place. I know there's like groups to help people grieve and deal with the aftermath. And there's also lots of help out there. It probably varies a lot state by state, locality to locality. Is there anything else that you're aware of, Austin, through the work you do that would be really useful for us to tell people or have links to underneath the episode?
Yeah, so I can definitely send you some links. And so this is another one that I wanted to touch on, right, was the Trevor Project.
Oh, okay.
So the Trevor Project is for the LGBTQ community. And it says, right, LGBTQ young people are 4 times more likely to attempt suicide. And suicide remains the second leading cause of death among all young people in the U.S.
That probably means they're 1/4 as valued and seen as the rest of us.
Right. And so, like, if you are part of that LGBTQ community, like, that would be another thing I would suggest. I think they have the Trevor Lifeline, which is 1-866-488-7386, and so you can, once again, it's about that connection. You can speak to like-minded people about what you're going through. Like, I'm a straight man. I don't know what a person in the LGBTQ community might be going through. I can relate to them in certain aspects of their life, I'm sure, but like, they have a whole different realm of hardships that they go through, and especially being a young person like that in junior high or high school, I'm sure that's not an easy thing to go through, and so the biggest thing I think is talking about it, no matter what you identify as, what your race, nationality, like, none of that matters. The biggest thing that matters is, like, reach out and talk to somebody about what you're going through, about your hopelessness, about, whatever the case may be. I think that's the biggest thing. And so, like, I'm super grateful that we do have these resources today. Like, you can pick up the phone and you can call somebody, you can get on the internet, and you can find all this, find support groups out, and just talk about what you're going through.
No, absolutely. And, was there anything else you definitely wanted to say before we had to stop?
No, I think we've kind of covered a little bit of everything.
Okay. Awesome. Austin, what I wanted to just say, for my piece to kind of wrap up the show today, like, I appreciate your bravery in coming on. I know this isn't an easy topic. I appreciate your courage and, like, just being open about your life and some of your vulnerabilities that you've had to face. And I appreciate how much it means to you to be a part of the service of trying to help others to ever have to go through this or feel this on either side. The person who would eventually not be here, and their family members. Like, you feel a dedication to that cause and to be of service in that area. And I can't commend you or tell you how much I think of that highly, or, like, look, English fucking sucks. There's not the right words. You're awesome. And thank you for all that you do. Did you have anything?
Yeah, and I appreciate you guys. Like, you guys get me through a lot, because I'm still crazy. I'm still an addict. I still get stuck in my own head sometimes, especially, like I said, I spend 12 hours a day by myself at work. it's really easy for my brain to go in a really negative direction. And so like podcasts, I lean on podcasts heavily, and you guys help me out tremendously.
That's awesome. And
Oh,
see,
well,
we
thank
always
you so
think our episodes are too long. He's got 12 hours every day. We need to make them longer.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Austin, and everybody out there. Hey, man, just try to see the people in your life and hear them just a little bit better today, right? Have a good week. See you later, Austin. Have a good day, okay, man?
You as well.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. That was really good stuff.
Yeah.
I appreciate
Yeah,
it.
thank you. It was nice to
Thank
meet
you
you
for
guys.
sharing your story.
Bye.
Bye.
Did you like this episode? Share it with people you think might get something out of it. Check out the rest of our episodes at recoverysortof.com. Also, while you're there, you can find ways to link up with us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Reddit, YouTube, anything. We're always looking for new ideas. Got an idea you want us to look into? Reach out to us.